for launching the ball towards Jones, who had his man beat, but wait. Another defensive back came in hot and appeared to have a great angle to make a play. Never mind. The defender misjudged the pass as the ball flew right over his outstretched arms, leaving Jones a clear path to the end zone.
That is stunning.
The Broncos' safety read the pass terribly, but Jones created the separation, leading to the game-tying touchdown. Incredibly, Baltimore is in the highly unlikely spot to kick their way to the conference championship. Miracle reception aside, no one expected the Ravens to have a fighting chance in this game. After falling just short of the Super Bowl last year, media members believe Baltimore can make another deep playoff run this year, except the Ravens just couldn't stay consistent. Following a 5-1 start to the season, Baltimore lost their defensive rock Ray Lewis in a Week 6 win over the Cowboys. At 37 years old, the longtime veteran might have lost a step, but his importance as a coach on the field couldn't be quantified. Without Lewis, the Ravens lost their identity defensively and finished terribly down the final stretch of the season, including an ass-whooping at home against Denver. Offensively, it also didn't help they regressed to a point where the org felt forced to make a late-season coaching change. They might have limped into the postseason, but the team found extra motivation from their captain. After being sidelined for most of the year, Lewis intended to return for the playoffs, but announced his plan to retire once the season wrapped. Despite entering this game against Denver as underdogs, Baltimore's defense capitalized off turnovers to stay right in the thick of it. Following Flacco's first TD to Smith, the Ravens returned an interception for a touchdown to take the lead. Then later in the third quarter, forced a fumble near midfield. 5 plays later, Baltimore punched in a touchdown to tie the game. The Ravens defense allowed a late fourth quarter touchdown on a drive kept alive by a pass interference penalty, but in overtime, they came to play. Neither team showed much life offensively, with both their opening drives ending in punts. On Baltimore's second possession, they escaped being backed up near their end zone, but again stalled out. The Ravens pinned the Broncos at the 7-yard line with their punt, but Denver strung together a strong drive. As the first overtime neared an end, any points would win the game, and the Broncos appeared ready to close this thing out. Lined up in shotgun on second down, Broncos QB Peyton Manning rolled out of the pocket to avoid pressure and threw a pass across his body that landed in the hands of Ravens cornerback Corey Graham. It was Graham's second interception of the game, but easily the most important one. After 6 plays, Baltimore worked their way deeper into Denver's territory, bringing us here. Neither fans nor journalists expected the Broncos to be in this spot in what's otherwise been a marvelous season. Denver entered this year with a fresh start. Last season, quarterback Tim Tebow captured the nation's attention, leading the Broncos to an unexpected playoff berth with a dramatic overtime win in the first round. But after Denver flamed out the following week, media members believed Tebow could only take the Broncos so far, and the franchise agreed. During the offseason, Broncos brass went after Peyton Manning, who had been released by the Colts, ultimately signing him to a 5-year deal. The Super Bowl winning quarterback had severe neck issues, missed the entire season last year, and as he entered the back half of his 30s, journalists didn't know what to expect of his return. Plus, when Manning did hit the field, he didn't show much promise. Denver started the season 2-3, which included an early loss where Manning tossed 3 picks. With each L, media members wondered if Manning's passing velocity would ever be the same, and if the team needed to reevaluate his future. Then it all clicked. After a rough start, Denver ran off 11 straight wins to finish the year, with Manning leading one of the league's best offenses. More impressively, besides Manning dicing up teams, Denver also fielded a top 5 defense and didn't allow any team to come within a touchdown of beating them. With strong units on both sides of the ball, the Broncos cruised into the playoffs, earning the 1 seed, and entered this matchup against Baltimore's heavy favorites. And to pop things off in this game, Denver got support from their special teams with a record-setting 90-yard punt return from Trendon Holiday to take an early lead. However, when Manning and the offense hit the field, things didn't go as smoothly. Manning's second pass of the matchup resulted in Baltimore's defense going the other way for a touchdown to take control. The pick six wasn't completely Manning's fault as the pass got deflected, and afterward, the longtime vet settled in. On Denver's following drive, Manning picked apart Baltimore's secondary, dinking and dunking down the field before taking a shot in the back of the end zone to even the game. Later in the second quarter, Manning again feasted on short and medium routes, eventually dropping another dime to take the lead. As both teams entered halftime tied at 21, Denver again got scoring help from Holiday with another record-breaking return to open the third quarter. Explosive plays have been the norm for this game, and as the Broncos looked to pull away, an uncharacteristic mistake by Manning kept Baltimore alive. Looking to extend Denver's lead in the third, Manning dropped back and pump faked to avoid pressure, but as he brought his arm down, a Ravens defender poked the ball out of his hands. That type of carelessness isn't expected of Manning, and while it was a crucial mistake, he atoned for the fumble later in the fourth quarter. With the game tied at 28, Manning led a 10-play drive covering nearly the length of the field that ended with a 17-yard strike, giving Denver the lead. That TD appeared to be the final nail in the coffin, but yeah. Still, after Jacoby's touchdown, the Broncos had 31 seconds on the clock and 2 timeouts to work their own magic. Instead, Denver took a knee, playing for overtime. I mean, Tebow won an overtime playoff game on this field just last year, so why not give one of the league's best quarterbacks proper time to try and win the game? Well, after nearly an entire overtime period, that happened. With each mistake Manning made in regulation, he fired back almost immediately. But with that costly interception, it appeared Denver was running out of time. Which brings us here. Baltimore's fate now lies on the leg of rookie kicker Justin Tucker. It's an extremely nerve-wracking spot to be in for a first-year starter, but the Ravens brought Tucker here for these exact moments. Special teams mistakes cost the Ravens a shot at the Super Bowl last season. Down 3 in the final seconds of the conference championship against New England, Baltimore lost devastatingly when kicker Billy Cundiff shanked the 32-yard field goal that would have sent the game to overtime. Cundiff remained on the roster, but Baltimore brought in some competition, signing undrafted free agent Justin Tucker this offseason. Despite finishing with a strong college career, Tucker didn't receive an invite to the NFL Combine. He took a different route, filming an unedited self-promotional video nailing field goals from different ranges before confidently staring into the camera and saying, "Pick me." The video clearly didn't work because he didn't get drafted, but Tucker shined in preseason play with the Ravens, beating out Cundiff for the starting job, a decision that worked out well for Baltimore. In his debut season, Tucker proved to be an extremely accurate kicker you can count on in the clutch. Tucker helped get revenge against New England in Week 3 when he drilled a game-winning kick with 2 seconds to play. Later in the season, he did the same against the Chargers, nailing the game-tying and game-winning field goal at the end of regulation and in overtime. This 47-yarder to send Baltimore to the conference championship is certainly on a grander stage, but Tucker has proved he can thrive in these moments. If he sinks this, it'll cap off a miraculous victory for the Ravens in a game they had no business being in. If he misses, Manning and the Broncos will have another shot to save what's been a storybook comeback season for the legendary QB. We've seen plenty of wackiness in this game already, so nothing is guaranteed. Welcome to a moment in history.
Kick is on its way and it looks good. The Baltimore Ravens have come into Denver and reached the AFC Championship game for the second straight year.
What up, y'all? Thanks for watching this episode of Rewinder. I know I mentioned that Tim Tebow overtime win a few times here, and guess what? We got a video for that, so check that out. And if you want to see just how badly that missed field goal was by the Ravens in the conference championship, we also have a video on that. So make sure to like and subscribe and keep on coming back.
It's no surprise to anyone that professional fighters tend to be strange. Almost never does someone choose to make a living out of pummeling other human beings if they're normal and well-adjusted. To go through the history of elite fighters is to look at a long list of damaged people. Everyone struggles with something, whether it be addiction, violent outbursts, infidelity, or even outright criminal activity. However, some fighters have the misfortune of struggling against all of the above, and no matter how good they are in the ring or the octagon, it doesn't help much when it comes to handling their personal issues. This is the story of John Jones, the self-described bad guy trying to be a good guy. Born on the 19th of July, 1987, John had a rough upbringing. His father, Arthur Jones Jr., was an assistant pastor at a Pentecostal church where the family lived in Endicott, New York. His mother, Camille Jones, was also an active church member, besides being a nurse who cared for intellectually disabled people. As you can imagine, all of their kids were raised attending church every Sunday. John was the third of 4 children, his younger brother being Chandler Jones, who grew up to be a Super Bowl winning defensive end for the Las Vegas Raiders in the NFL, and his big brother being Arthur Jones III, a now retired defensive end who was also in the NFL. It is a massive understatement to say that their family's genetics are favorable for athleticism. One glaring omission from the Jones family lineup is their sister, Carmen Jones, who tragically passed at 17 years old after a 2-year-long fight with brain cancer. The siblings were all very close, and her passing only brought the brothers closer. According to John's brother, Chandler, the 3 brothers slept in the same bedroom, which resulted in the much too frequent occasion of a piece of furniture being broken due to them fighting each other. In somewhat of a genius move, their father solved this by buying a wrestling mat and putting it in their basement. Every day, the brothers would wrestle with each other for hours, which created a hyper-competitive environment in their household, with them competing to see who would do even menial things like drinking the most milk or opening the refrigerator the fastest. This led to John joining the wrestling team in the 7th grade, and ultimately becoming a wrestling champion at a very young age, along with his brother Arthur. But this prowess had its costs. John claims he was very sheltered by his parents and was never allowed to go over to any of his friends' houses, not even once. This made him hyper-focused on wrestling since it was pretty much the only thing he was allowed to do, and he never took time off from it, getting 3 seasons in a year, whereas other wrestlers would only get 1. John's exceptional comfort with the hazards that come with combat sports isn't surprising, considering that he actually had a history of going out of his way to expose himself to danger even as a kid. This proclivity led to a near-death experience when John was just 6 years old, when he decided to swim out beyond the point his parents had allowed him to. This resulted in him losing his footing and beginning to drown, only to be saved at the very last moment by someone who was going by on a boat and happened to notice him struggling to come back to the surface. But before I go any further, this video is brought to you by today's sponsor, Bespoke Post. Bespoke Post is a monthly membership club delivering a box of awesome top-shelf goods from under-the-radar brands. It's free to join and you can skip a month or cancel anytime. Every month, they introduce their members to cool new products, outdoor gear, barware, home and kitchen goods, clothing, and more. All you have to do is fill out a preference quiz and they'll let you know which boxes would best fit your personality. Every box has around $70 worth of goods inside, but costs you only a fraction of the value. You'll get a box assigned to you, and before it's shipped, you'll get a preview of what comes inside to decide if you'd like to keep it, swap it for a different box, or skip the month entirely for no charge. You only pay for what you actually want. And their lineup changes each month. This month, they sent me the Weekender, Chill, and Dram boxes. The Chill box has the super nice cooler in it, which holds 23 liters, is tear resistant up to 370.
Nobody cares. Shut up.
On summer transfer deadline day, the Saudi Pro League went hell for leather in their pursuit of Liverpool's Mohamed Salah. An offer of more than £150 million from Al Ittihad was rejected by the Reds, who reportedly ruled out selling Salah that window, even for a world record-breaking £215 million. Al Ittihad were reported to have been willing to pay Salah £2.45 million a week, which also would have been a world record, plus a £55,000 win bonus and lucrative endorsement deals with 3 major Saudi state-owned companies. Liverpool refused to budge, Salah never forced the issue, and in the end, the Saudis ran out of time, with a strong suspicion that they would come back for Salah, who is undoubtedly the biggest football superstar in the Arab or Muslim world, in 2024. Though the Saudi Pro League had missed out on Salah, they were able to get over the line deadline day deals to sign Luis Felipe from Real Betis, Damari Gray from Everton, and former Luton, Brentford, Burnley and Watford striker Andre Gray from Greek outfit Aris. Salah would have provided the finishing touches to a window which had seen the likes of Neymar, Karim Benzema, N'Golo Kante, Riyad Mahrez, Sadio Mane and Jordan Henderson join 5-time Ballon d'Or winner Cristiano Ronaldo in Saudi Arabia, as the Saudi Pro League outspent every other league in world football barring the Premier League, despite signing predominantly older players with less market value, and handed out a whole series of salaries that were, and still are, without precedent in the history of football. It was expected that in the January window, the Saudis would come again, if not necessarily for Salah, then for a litany of other superstars, including a possible loan move for Lionel Messi during the Major League Soccer off-season. Less than 5 months on from the league's last deadline day, in which they scrambled to sign one of the biggest names in world football for a record fee and wage, the Saudi Pro League's January window shut quietly earlier this week, on the same day that I turned 28, to about as much fanfare. For context, I went to a Turkish restaurant with my girlfriend, my mum brought me round a cake, and I contemplated the slow but incessant march towards my own death. There were no links with Salah or Messi this time around, or even the strata of players below that. In fact, only one player joined the Saudi Pro League for a fee this window, and that was Brazilian left-back Renan Lodi, who spent last season on loan at Nottingham Forest and joined Al Hilal from Marseille. There was one big-name deadline day arrival, namely that of a 35-year-old Ivan Rakitic, who joined Al-Shabaab. Though even then, he was only replacing fellow veteran former Sevilla star Eva Banega, who returned to Argentina. Arguably the biggest transfer involving the Saudi Pro League this window was actually Jordan Henderson, who left fellow former Liverpool captain Steven Gerrard's team Al Ettifaq after less than 6 months, having successfully spread football around the globe and sullied his own reputation. So much so that he was booed by England fans in October at a friendly against Australia. All hail Hendo. Just you watch. I bet I'll have Dutch people interested in football before long. The man's a miracle worker. But why the sudden change in tact? It's not as though Saudi Arabia has run out of money, people are still buying oil. It's not as though it is mission accomplished in terms of improving Saudi Arabia's image or making domestic football more lucrative. Attendances at games and on television have fallen far short of many insiders' expectations. And it's not as though Saudi Arabia has halted investments in sport overall. The 2023 Riyadh season has seen the nation host high-profile boxing matches, tennis tournaments, and football Super Cups. Even there, though, there have been problems. Henderson, you see, isn't the only person to have been booed. At the 2023 Spanish Super Cup semi-final between Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid, fans booed and jeered during a minute's silence for Germany legend Franz Beckenbauer, prompting questions about whether the already under fire RFEF should really be hosting their tournament in Saudi Arabia solely for financial gain. Still, it could always have been worse. The 2023 Turkish Super Cup, also meant to have been held in Riyadh, had to be cancelled after the Saudi authorities denied Galatasaray and Fenerbahce's requests to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of Turkey becoming a republic, leading to both teams refusing to play. Elsewhere, Karim Benzema, Roberto Firmino and Jota are all reportedly unhappy but were denied January moves elsewhere. One of the 4 PIF-owned clubs, Al Ittihad, are in crisis. Aymeric Laporte has talked of widespread discontent among foreign players, and some Saudi Pro League players, despite being paid millions of dollars monthly by state-owned clubs, have chosen to live outside of Saudi Arabia and commute in for training and games. So just what on earth is going on? Well, that's a question that I've been asked a lot over the last month, which means, regrettably, that's what today's video is all about. So sit back, relax, and join me on yet another journey to Saudi Arabia. I feel like we've been there more times than most diplomats and arms dealers over the last 12 months at this stage, as we take a look at why Saudi Pro League clubs were so quiet in the most recent January transfer window, why several big-name signings supposedly want to leave, and whether Saudi Arabia's football project really is already disintegrating, even faster than China's. Though there are undoubtedly some problems afoot for the Saudi Pro League, which we will obviously come on to, it's probably worth beginning by making the league's own case for them and acknowledging some of the understandable reasons why the January window was never likely to be as extreme as the summer one. For a start, Saudi Pro League teams signed Neymar and Benzema in the summer window, having already recruited Cristiano Ronaldo just over a year ago now. They also had failed in pursuits of Lionel Messi, Kylian Mbappe, and Mohamed Salah, none of whom ever seem likely to leave their current clubs mid-season, in Mbappe and Salah's case, or just 6 months into a 2.5-year contract in the case of Messi. From that level of ambition and investment, the only way was down, unless they could somehow convince Erling Haaland and Jude Bellingham to sacrifice their careers at 23 and 20, and even then, probably at a cost of about £1 billion for the pair of them. Then you've got simple regulatory issues. The Saudi Pro League may not be bound to any kind of financial fair play or profit and sustainability restrictions, and it is a good job, because they would fail all of them far more spectacularly than any club in the history of European football, but they still have some internal regulations. You may recall that when Al Nassr signed Cristiano Ronaldo, in what was really the first blockbuster Saudi Pro League signing, and is arguably still the biggest, it resulted in Cameroon captain Vincent Aboubakar being forced out. Aboubakar in fact volunteered to leave the club following Ronaldo's arrival from Manchester United, but only because he was aware of the Saudi Pro League's foreign player quota, which meant that one of Al Nassr's foreign players would have to be offloaded to make way for the Portuguese superstar, and he probably assumed that, as a forward, it was likely to be him. Al Nassr reportedly weren't that keen on getting rid of Aboubakar, and even enlisted Ronaldo's help in an effort to convince him to stay, but by then the damage had already been done. Aboubakar subsequently rejoined Besiktas for his third stint at the club, though he was excluded from the squad in December for poor performance, along with Eric Bailly and Jean Onana. The Saudi Pro League allows for a maximum of 8 foreign players in every team squad, plus an extra spot for foreign nationals who were born in Saudi Arabia, and following such a wild summer spending spree, many clubs are at that limit. In fact, every club other than ABBA, who are down to 7, having lost Cameroon duo Devis Apassi and Kartoko Akambi, and Iraqi Saad Natik this season, are at the maximum number of 8, and roughly half have more than 8. If you're wondering how that works, well, just as in the Premier League, if you have more than the number of registrable players, or players eligible to be registered, you have to leave some of them out of your squad. Saudi Pro League teams have ended up in a situation where former Leeds United star Ezcan Alioski is unregistered at Al Ahly, Sweden's Robin Kazan is unregistered at Al Ettifaq, Neymar is out in the cold due to his ACL injury at Al Hilal, Englishman Mo Adams can't yet be registered for Al Khalij despite having only just joined them, former Dutch wonderkid Adam Mar is off the books at Damac, and, most remarkably of all, Al Ettifaq have 2 players who are currently unregistered as a result of Al Ettifaq having 10 foreign players in their current squad, plus Egyptian national Nuruddin Al-Bahar, who was born in Saudi Arabia and is therefore able to be registered. That means that, in order to sign any foreign players whatsoever, Saudi Pro League teams, with the sole exception of ABBA now, must sell 1 or more of their foreign players first. Buying and selling players is, of course, part and parcel of football for all clubs, but it becomes increasingly difficult when you're paying an aging player 4, 5, 6, heck, even 10 times as much as they could possibly hope to earn anywhere else. Most of you watching this can probably think of a player that your club has signed on a lot of money where it hasn't quite worked out, but because of their salaries, it has proved very difficult to shift them. The most famous, or infamous example perhaps, is surely Winston Bogarde, who played 9 Premier League games in 4 years at Chelsea, and I think none in his last 3, but refused to leave the club because no one else would offer him anything like the what was then an extortionate £40,000 a week that he was on. A similar problem ultimately led to Leicester City's relegation last season. The Foxes, much like several Saudi clubs, had a bloated squad which prevented them from registering any new players, and while they had lots of interest in all of their best players, who they were desperate to keep, they had next to no interest in their squad players, often on significantly inflated salaries, who would fail to perform. It prevented Leicester from being able to operate in the transfer market. Backup goalkeeper Alex Smithies was their only summer arrival prior to the start of last season, until centre-back Wout Faes joined from Rennes on deadline day. And that was it, despite the £75 million sale of Wesley Fofana to Chelsea. It's a problem at all clubs to a degree, unless they have absolutely flawless recruitment, but for Saudi Pro League clubs, it's like Leicester City last season, which was itself a fairly extreme example, but on so many steroids that it could win the Tour de France. Forget the fact that the Saudi Pro League is a league and people compete in the Tour de France, not leagues. You're overthinking the analogy, alright? The point being, it's like that, but a lot worse. Of course, in order to tempt players to Saudi Arabia, an arid desert nation with little domestic football pedigree, a league which is ranked below some second tiers in Europe, and one of the most authoritarian and repressive states in the world, the Saudis didn't just have to offer players a little bit more money than they could earn in more hospitable countries and competitive leagues, but far, far, far more. Forget about Ronaldo, Neymar and Benzema, who the Saudi state have made the 3 highest paid players on the planet, with Benzema increasing his €28 million a year salary at Real Madrid to a reported €120 million a year deal at Al Ettifaq. It is the players below them who are almost more remarkable, and more relevant in this context at least. Just take Seiko Fofana, the Ivory Coast midfielder, who joined Al Nassr from Lens in the summer, but moved on again in the January window, joining fellow Saudi Pro League side Al Ettifaq under Steven Gerrard instead. Fofana earns a reported €15.2 million a season in Saudi Arabia, which is about £250,000 or $315,000 a week. That is more than Bernardo Silva and Rodri, 2 of the best midfields in the world, earn at Manchester City, albeit Silva was reportedly offered £500,000 a week to move to Saudi Arabia in the summer but turned it down. Say, for example, that Al Nassr, who are one of the big 4 directly PIF-owned Saudi Pro League clubs, wanted to offload a foreign player in order to free up an extra foreign player slot, and Fofana was the player that they decided to get rid of. Seriously, who on earth is going to sign him? Fofana is probably on 5 times what he earns at Lens, at least twice, if not 3 times as much, as he could hope to earn anywhere outside of Saudi Arabia, and that's before you even get into the €25 million fee that Al Nassr paid just 6 months ago, and which no one would now pay for the 28-year-old. That is exactly what happened with Fofana, with the solution being to loan into Al Ettifaq, who had an additional foreign player slot open up, after Jordan Henderson forced his way out of the club after just 6 months. Essentially, the Saudi Pro League has just shifted the burden of Fofana, who isn't a bad player by the way, he is a very good one, he's just never worth £250,000 a week, and didn't seem to fit in at Al Nassr from one club to another. Because no team outside of Saudi Arabia, without access to Saudi state resources and the motives of the Saudi state to invest such ludicrous sums of money into the sport, would touch him with a 10-foot pole. Unless, as in the case of Henderson, the player themselves is so determined to leave that they are willing to take a massive pay cut in order to move elsewhere. Of course, even when players do want to leave, there are few instances in which they're going to be prepared to do just that. And so you end up in the situation that the Saudi Pro League currently finds itself in. Just 6 months on from the league's wild spending spree, lumbered with a whole load of players who, whether they are happy in Saudi Arabia, and whether their clubs are happy with them, are near enough impossible to ship. Funnily enough, this was previously the case with some of these exact same players before the Saudi Pro League exploded onto the scene. Chelsea would have found it near enough impossible to offload a 32-year-old Kalidou Koulibaly for nothing when he was on £160,000 a week last summer, let alone the £17 million that they received for him from Al Hilal. Fabinho moved around the Liverpool midfield with all of the guile, energy and agility of a wardrobe last season, and it is doubtful that anyone else would have matched or exceeded the £180,000 a week that he earns at Liverpool, and Bayern Munich would have run into similar difficulties offloading former Red Star Sadio Mane following a disappointing debut campaign at the Allianz Arena when he was on an enormous reported £320,000 a week. We saw the exact same thing with the Chinese Super League. Though it was often portrayed as being a challenger league or as a threat to Europe's elite, and there were 1 or 2 jitters within boardrooms when Alex Teixeira chose Jiangsu Suning ahead of both Liverpool and Chelsea, in reality, by and large at least, it was actually a net positive for top European teams and leagues. Once again, no one else would have paid Chelsea more than £50 million for Oscar were it not for Xi Jinping and the CCP greenlighting enormous Chinese investments in football. And not many clubs other than Guangzhou Evergrande would have been falling over themselves to take Paulinho off Tottenham's hands after he fell so far short of expectations in his debut campaign in North London. So, the difficulty of moving on players they've already signed, who perhaps haven't worked out, is one problem, as is the cap on foreign players. Except, of course, for the fact that the reason there's no FFP or PNS in Saudi Arabia is because they control their own internal markets and regulations, and, for obvious reasons, they don't want any spending or loss regulations, because almost all of their clubs are currently spending and losing mounds of cash, and that is all part of the plan. If they wanted to increase their foreign player quota, therefore, from 8 to 10 or even from 8 to 12 players, just as they have increased it from 4 to 8 since the 2016-17 season, in order to facilitate a whole raft of new big money and big name acquisitions, they very easily could. In some ways then, their argument only kicks the can down the road. So why haven't they? Well, there are a few hypotheses. One is that Saudi Arabia's mass investment in football was all centred around the desire to host the FIFA World Cup, and with that now safely in the bag, that sense of urgency has largely subsided. Qatar paid the likes of Zinedine Zidane and then Barcelona boss Pep Guardiola millions of dollars for endorsements in the build-up to their 2022 World Cup bid, and most famously, David Beckham received a reported $180 million to become the country's ambassador for the next 10 years ahead of the tournament, with a particular focus on the World Cup, which needed all of the promotion and good press that it could get its hands on, following FIFA's corruption scandal and numerous exposés on the treatment and conditions of migrant workers. Not this migrant worker, his paying conditions were excellent. These ones, not so much. Saudi Arabia felt they could kill two government critics with one executioner's sword, to coin an old phrase, by bringing players to the Saudi Pro League with either an explicit agreement to promote the country's host credentials and the future tournament, or merely an implied one. You don't have to be Detective Poirot to figure out that was the case, when basically every big-name Saudi Pro League signing had a carefully choreographed promo message scheduled to be uploaded within minutes of Saudi Arabia announcing their official bid to host the 2034 World Cup. My particular favourite came courtesy of Karim Benzema, who is rumoured to be being paid €20 million a year to promote Saudi Arabia's prospective World Cup, on top of his €100 million a year playing contract, who quote tweeted the Saudi Football Federation's announcement and wrote, and when I say he wrote, I am really stretching the meaning of those words to breaking point, quote, "Wow, amazing news. The future is bright. Congrats to all my friends and fans in Saudi Arabia on this big announcement. I know how much you love the game and what this would mean to you. It would be an incredible FIFA World Cup. Hashtag Saudi 2034. End quote. What a heartfelt and touching message from someone who just earnestly wants Saudi Arabia to host the World Cup. It has been a lifelong ambition of his to make it happen. The €20 million a year is just a bonus. The real motivation is because he knows how much they love the game. Didn't you hear the man? I especially enjoyed the opening. Wow, amazing news. As if it has come as a great shock to him that the country paying his wages, plus €20 million a year to promote their World Cup, has bid to host the World Cup. Wow, amazing news. Whoever could have foreseen such a shocking turn of events? That is enough dunking on Benzema, for now at least. Mahrez and Gerrard's tweets or Instagram posts were no less embarrassing. Old Stevie went with, and again I use those words loosely, incredible to think that the 11-year journey to a home FIFA World Cup might have already started for some of my youth players. Hard work starts now. Clapping emoji, Saudi Arabia flag, hashtag Saudi 2034. End quote. You can tell that those weren't Gerrard's own words because at no point did he say, yeah, of course, 3 out of 10, must try harder. The point being, however, that Saudi Arabia has got their World Cup now, and they have got it unopposed. Unlike their initial 2030 World Cup bid, as one of 3 co-hosts, by dropping their bid to co-host in 2030, which they should never really have been eligible to do under FIFA rules, but we will just skip over that for now. FIFA gave Saudi Arabia a clear run at hosting in 2034 on their own, effectively rigging the process so no one else could challenge them, and making it fairly clear that it would be pointless to do so anyway, because FIFA had already made their decision. I can buy that, having bought the right to host the World Cup unopposed, the sense of urgency among Mohammed bin Salman and his inner circle to sign part players, part ambassadors on exorbitant salaries may have somewhat waned. After all, they've got all the paid-up ambassadors recruited over the last 12 months, so what's the rush to add any more with the World Cup already in the bag and over 10 years into the future? The fact that Saudi Arabia's World Cup is over 10 years away, however, also surely adds a desire to make the Saudi Pro League project a long-term one. Over the next 10 years, Saudi Arabia is going to have to build 10 state-of-the-art new football stadiums, all with capacities in excess of 40,000 and at least some over 60 and 80,000, as well as renovating a further 4 to bring them up to FIFA requirements, in order to give them 14 venues capable of hosting games at a FIFA World Cup. Following the Qatar fiasco, and the persistent problem of World Cup venues becoming white elephants once the month-long show leaves town, FIFA mandated that host nations must have at least 7 existing suitable stadiums, and could only build a further 7. Those rules were very quietly changed, very conveniently for Saudi Arabia, with that requirement falling from 7 to 4 existing stadiums, to seamlessly pave the way for a successful Saudi bid. Saudi Arabia isn't a micro-state.
Shout out to HITC 7s. Shout out to my mother for preparing lunch. Shout out to everyone. Shout out to Queen Elizabeth. I'm the Backshot Bandit.